record in this computer.
Welcome to episode 23 of the Civil War Breakfast Club podcast, joined by my co-host, the woman who puts the ooh in O.O. Howard, Mary Fincher. I am Darren Weeks. Hey, Mary, how are you?
Ooh.
Ooh.
Is that what you meant?
The ooh and O.O. We gotta mention him tonight because he's gonna be making an appearance. So I guess we gotta get it ready for that one.
Yep,
Get
we
my
do.
garden hose to hose you down because O.O. Howard's gonna be here. So here we go.
He may just be the MVP of this one. Who knows?
Oh, I think he's going to be. I think he's going to be anyway, even if he wasn't even there. So we'll give him credit. We'll give him credit. So hey, how's your week been?
Good. How about you?
Not bad. Not bad. Can't complain. Complaints. Today's Tuesday, moving right along into mid to late January as we move on here. So had a good live, I thought, on Saturday. Had a lot of good people dropping in. As this is recorded, it's Tuesday. Tomorrow will be our next roundtable.
Yep.
So when this drops on Saturday, we will have the roundtable. And on Saturday, we will be having the announcement of the winners of our book raffle. Yep. So there's a lot of good things coming down the pike, Mary. So we will talk about that. And speaking of coming down the pike, we're going to talk about old Uncle Blingy. Williams comes to Sherman as he goes into the Carolinas. I know we got some business to do first, but the subject of tonight's action-packed show is Sherman in the Carolinas. Now, we're going to be talking specifically about how he brushes up against Charleston. He's going to be going to Columbia. This is going to be the first of a two-parter, Mary.
Yes.
So we ain't going to be talking about no Fort Fisher tonight. So we don't need your letters. Complain.
No, we're just taking this to Columbia.
We're taking it to Columbia, and that's what we're going to be doing. So we have plenty of stuff to talk about, and we will have a lot of fun doing this as we continue along as the wild and crazy march of William T. Sherman continues as he starts to move his way up north into the Carolinas.
Yep, it's basically just a continuation of the March to the Sea. And by the way, I am drinking Portage India Pale Ale tonight.
Well, that's kind of a lazy announcement. Anyway, and what are you drinking out of for your mug?
My William T. Sherman mug, of course.
Shocker. And I am going to be drinking Escape Plan Sour Ale because of Sherman. And this is by the Great Trillium here in Boston.
Nice.
And I'm drinking it out of my Uncle Blingy I Dream of a Brighter Atlanta coffee mug, which I have shown on many an occasion. Yes. So that's the only one I have for Sherman. So that's what you get.
Well, I had a reason for choosing Portage because admittedly I did go to the Lickbo, as I usually do on Tuesdays.
Any day that ends in a Y?
Yep, pretty much. Fucker. Anyway, but I chose Portage because in this part of the, during the Carolinas campaign, they are encountering a lot more water and having to go through it. One soldier wrote in his diary that he said they were becoming amphibious because of all the water and swamps that they had to go through. So that's why portaging canoes, not that they were portaging canoes. I don't know. Is portage an American word too? Like, are you familiar with what portaging is?
Something about a canoe.
Oh my God. Did I choose a completely Canadian thing?
You start talking about poutine and Tim Hortons, we're going to be going off the rails. So yes.
Okay, so portage is when you pick a canoe, when you're canoeing and you pick it up and you and your canoe buddy have to basically carry it over your head till the next stream or river or wherever the fuck you're going to take your canoe.
Yeah, we don't have those. We have cars here. We have motorized vehicles. We don't have canoes, and we don't have bears and other stuff up there to ride around on. So that's probably why you don't know what it is. But in any case, this is a great story, by the way. This is fantastic stuff. This is stuff you only get here.
I was like, portage, that means rivers and stuff, and everybody will get it. No, it's a Canadian thing.
Another job done. So, as we get moving along, Mary, on the Sherman of the Carolinas, we're going to talk a little bit where we left off. So last time we saw old Uncle Blingy and his gang of merry men, on his left wing, led by Slocum, and the right wing, of course, led by the great O.O. Howard we talked about. They were in Savannah. They had reached the March to the Sea, and they took the surrender, and they were sitting there for a little bit of time, trying to get their bearings together a little bit about trying what the next game plan was. And so there was a lot of stuff going on at the time. We mentioned
There
before
was.
about Ebenezer Creek, right? So
Yep.
he's got to sit and listen to Stanton about that whole fiasco on Ebenezer Creek,
Mhm.
and with all the slaves being left behind. So they get through that pretty well. But the rumblings now in the South and the Confederate side are starting because they're getting really nervous, because now Sherman is in Savannah. He's connected with the Navy. He's getting resupplied.
Yeah.
And so they know he's probably going to be going north. A lot of the folks in the Charleston area are freaking out because they think he's going to come get Charleston, which I think a lot of people wanted, especially in the north. But they didn't really know. And so even before Sherman even began his march, Beauregard, our boy Beauregard, he was the commanding the Department of the West. He anticipated Sherman's march because he figured he was going to be going east to get to the ocean and eventually was going to try to connect and reinforce Grant, right?
Yeah.
But there was so many, even Lincoln didn't know where he was going, but I think what he was trying to do was not a surprise. They just didn't know what his ultimate goal was. In the state of South Carolina, which was the beginning of the party, right?
Yep.
Of secession.
That's
So
where it all began.
they were sensitive to all this. And so in South Carolina, there's a governor by the name of Andrew McGrath. Okay. Harvard guy. He's from up here. So another guy who couldn't get into Boston College, Mary.
He was also a judge, wasn't he?
He was a judge. He was a federal judge. And this is prior to secession, obviously. 1860, he resigns after secession happens. He's disgusted by the federal outreach. He calls it the altar has been sacrificed by tyranny. So it sounds like a fun ideologue, right?
He gives quite the speech. I would encourage anybody to Google his speech because it is quite fiery. Like he's
not a fun guy to probably be around.
No.
But you know who likes him though is Jefferson Davis, Mary. So in 1862, he's appointed to be a judge in the Confederacy. He ultimately gets elected 1864 to be the governor of South Carolina. Now, he is going to be nervous because he wants defenses in South Carolina because he's the governor. He's the governor. But as Sherman arrives in December of 1864, Savannah's retreated. A lot starts, and we could talk about the politics of the whole thing. You know, like sometimes you're at the Dairy Queen up there in Kincardine. Sometimes you got the two bosses you got to deal with, and you don't know who the hell to listen to. Well, this is how Sherman felt, right? He's got two bosses. He's got Henry Halleck and he's got Ulysses S. Grant.
Yes.
And you know, a lot of people on Christmas Eve are sitting around having a good time, a couple of drinks. God knows what you're doing on Christmas Eve. But you know, Sherman, they're writing letters. They're writing a lot of letters. So
they are.
And he's getting a letter. Halleck ends up basically writing to Sherman. And I'm going to read some letters here, so just bear with me here for a second. So the political side of the Charleston thing is there, and then there's the military side. So Halleck is going to write to Sherman. He basically says, I hope if you capture Charleston, that by some accident the place will be destroyed, and if some salt is applied to the site, it may prevent the growth of future crops of secession. So he's saying, listen, Blingy, if you get a chance, fuck these guys up.
Yeah. Because
they started the whole damn thing. But then you know what he does though? He changes his mind. I don't know what he sits there and says, listen, you know, I do think that the best thing to do in the better part of your army is to basically go back and go get Lee. So he kind of does that.
But you got to wonder if Grant's talking to him as well, because Grant sends Sherman that letter and he wants Sherman to come up, you know.
He does.
Like via ship, and Sherman has to do his convincing. Like he says, this is going to take 4 weeks. And you know that, like he basically says, you know that men are going to get fucked up on those boats and they're not going to be in any shape to fight after they get off the boats for a few days. And then he was basically like, why don't you just let me take a stroll, like go to Columbia, I'll go to Raleigh. And then like, that's only going to take 6 weeks, which is just 2 weeks longer than what you're expecting.
Well, what he does, he tells Halleck what he wants to hear, and he tells Grant what he wants to hear.
Yeah.
So basically, Sherman's going to write to Grant again Christmas Eve. So he's writing. He basically says, one reason. Now he's already written Halleck this one letter, right? Well, first of all, what Sherman responds back to Halleck. So Halleck gets that letter to Sherman. Sherman gets the letter back, and he says, The whole army, this is Sherman now, the whole army is burning with an insatiable desire to wreak vengeance upon South Carolina. And then he goes, then he writes, I will move the 15th Corps, which will be on the right wing, and that'll position them into Charleston. And if you've seen their history of that corps, he says, you will see they do their work quite well. Then he says they will not need salt.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cool. So he's telling Halleck, don't you worry, we're gonna take care of this. But then he writes, he goes to write, he writes Grant, and he says, just so you know, one reason I am going to ignore Charleston is I believe they will reduce their garrison by a small force, and I know the neck back of Charleston will be made impregnable to assaults, and we will hardly have time for siege operations. So he's basically, he's trying to satisfy both bosses, kind of like what you do up there at your job.
Yep, exactly.
He's telling them both what they want to hear. So again, while this is all going on, basically what's going to happen is Grant and Stanton ultimately are going to basically approve his plan. So they're basically saying, listen, it's okay with, leave Charleston alone. We're totally cool with that.
Yeah.
But he says, just make sure there's no strong force left behind that's going to come back and bite you in the ass. Just take care of them. And but what this is going to do, Mary, it's going to piss off a lot of the people in the North who want Charleston wiped off the face of the earth.
Exactly.
There's so much anger about Charleston. But again, you got to look at the military thing. But you know what else is going on in Charleston, Mary? The Charleston papers are taunting the Union. Mm-hmm. Right? While this is going on, this takes some balls, by the way. We'll talk about the Army lineup for what they actually had. The Charleston papers are basically saying they're saying they want to fight Sherman. They write, the soil of our mother state will again drink the blood of our foes. This is from the Daily South Carolinian. Sounds like a fun newspaper. But you can see the bravado these guys have. Right.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, they know, and they've heard stories from Georgia. Sherman mentions it in his memoirs and he was counting on that. He wanted to put fear in their hearts, and he was hoping that the stories would be exaggerated, and they were. And one of the things that he does write to Grant, and this is more of you can see the friendship between them, is he says, I do sincerely believe that the whole United States, North and South, would rejoice to have this army turned loose on South Carolina. Mm-hmm. So he's trying to say to Grant, we need to do this. And then he also says to Grant, I feel a personal dislike to turning northward.
Yeah.
Let me do my shit down here. Let me fuck these guys up.
What's funny was there's lots of, a lot of what Sherman says and does, you study years later, and people still talk about why he didn't wreck Charleston, right? And there's all kinds of rumors. And if you go to Charleston, because I've gone down there from time to time, what the locals think, and I've heard this from, I've not read this anywhere, admittedly, I've just heard this in the bars and talking about it. They all say because Sherman had a girlfriend in Charleston, and she begged him to save her city and leave it alone. That's to this day a very common theory in Charleston about why he didn't do it.
Yeah, well, there are a few women he mentions in his memoirs when he gets to Columbia, but there is that. But the other thing too that people don't think about is that, Columbia is not only the capital, but it's also a munitions center as well. They're making munitions there. And for them to get to Columbia, which is what Sherman always believed. Now he's going to feint, we'll get to this, he's going to feint Howard look like Howard's going towards Charleston and that Slocum's going towards Augusta. But Columbia might have been the more strategic target for him, which is probably why he chose it.
Oh, there's no question. There was no reason except to take Charleston, except for just vengeance. There was no
exactly.
We'll talk about how Charleston eventually falls a little bit later, but it's one of those things. It'd be out of pure spite. It'd be just out of revenge. And Blingy, Sherman, he's got a plan. He's going to stick with it. The South Carolina citizens, though, are still freaking out because they want not. They've heard these stories. You've all heard the stories about Sherman, and they're pleading and begging to the Confederate government. They just want one corps from Lee in the Army of Northern Virginia to be sent down to Charleston.
And Lee's like, fuck that.
So he's got Hardee, and but he's got no real force to defend the state. So they appeal to Davis and Secretary of War Snedden, and you know what they both do? They both refer them to Lee. They say, we don't know what to do. What do you think? So Lee, he writes a letter. It's February 11th, 1865 when this letter gets sent. And he's basically, and you can see the tone in his letter because he's, well, you can tell he's fucking had it. He is, I have sent all the troops of this army can be spared. If the citizens of Georgia and South Carolina will fill up their ranks, they will be able to protect their country. So Lee's like, you know what? Go screw. We've had so much opportunity to fill up. You guys, we have to draft. We have no people running on our army. I can't send you anybody. You got people. Go figure it out. So it's it kind of shows the mentality where they, it's almost like the guy at the bar who starts a fight and gets mad that no one comes to his help.
Yeah.
That's kind of what you think about it a little bit, right?
Yeah, exactly. It is.
If you're at the mine some night on a Friday night and your left first core broke both first crap, and next thing you know,
first core broke first. Howard called it first.
Yeah, definitely. But let's talk about how this whole army is set up again. We'll go back to this. So Sherman's obviously running the show, and he's got the two wings. So he's got Henry Slocum. We'll hear about quite a bit because he's going to live up to his slow to come Slocum nickname here in a few minutes.
Mm-hmm.
The right wing is led by some guy named Oliver Otis Howard. Mary, have you heard of him? He's a Mainer. You may have heard of him. He's got the one with the hair.
My boy.
So under Slocum, he's got basically two corps. He's got about 25,000 guys. He's got Jefferson C. Davis running the 14th Corps, and he's got Alpheus Williams, who's in charge of the 20th Corps.
Yeah.
Now, Howard, running the right wings, also got about 26,000 guys. He's got the notorious 15th Corps with Peter Osterhaus and Blackjack Logan running the, they're
or Blackjack Darren.
Blackjack Darren. And then the 17th Corps by a guy named Frank Blair. Well, I said that one time, and I got to keep saying that every single time. Some guy named Frank Blair.
Francis P. Blair Jr.?
Yeah, I'd go by Frank too. But he's got Kilpatrick's cavalry, who's about 5,800 guys, and he's only got 70,000 artillery pieces. So again, you want to see the speed that Sherman wants. He wants to limit how much he has to carry.
Yeah.
Going back to the Ebenezer Creek thing. So he's going to spread his wings out from North Savannah. Oh, Howard is going to be on the right, obviously. His 15th and 17th Corps are going to basically go on a boat, like a lot of people have near Hilton Head, and with Logan and Blair, they're going to push along to a place called Pataglio, South Carolina.
Yeah,
no chance I got to pronounce that right, so I'm sorry, but that's how it looks. And which is a city just southwest of Charleston. Slocum is going to be in the left wing. He's got his 14th and his 20th. He's going to move up the Savannah River and cross at a place called Sisters Ferry, and then move to a town called Robertville, right? And then Kilpatrick basically is going to run behind the right wing. He wants to basically draw some troops out of Beaufort or South Carolina and give Sherman that real strong foothold in the state.
Yeah, and I think a couple things to mention here too is that like Howard's own thoughts on the Carolinas campaign was that he said, I felt in the outset in view of the Carolina campaign that it was to be the most trying of any which we had hitherto undertaken. Our enemies would increase as we advanced northward. Food and forage would be destroyed before us. The swamps would be worse than in Georgia, and our troubles would multiply. And the key thing to take away from that is the terrain that they're going through. It is very different from what they encountered on the march to the sea. Like there's pine woods everywhere, and there's swamps. There's cypress trees that they're having, like cypress trees. And then Howard says that occasionally you would get wide stretches of what would appear to be good ground, but then there would be quicksand.
Well,
and
South
that's
Carolina
why they had
as a whole. It's a drainage swamp.
It is, yeah.
Everything runs from north to south. It creates swamps. It's got marshes, to your point. It's got all kinds of stuff. Mosquitoes, clowns, whatever you want. They're all there, right? But to your point, again, you're talking about a terrain issue that's going to come up.
Yeah, and they're having to tear up railways as they go. That's a part of their orders for this. But they also have to build corduroy roads, and it takes many, many men to do this. And some of the refugees, the freed slaves, they are the ones doing this work. And there was one quote that I read that said that without them, they may not have been able to do this. Without those refugee freed slaves, they may not have been able to do this. But because of that, these men are not moving as quickly as they did on the march to the sea, just because of this terrain they're encountering. Now, some days they would make more miles than others, but the one soldier I mentioned at the beginning, he said they had to become amphibious. So they're having to wade through swampy areas and all this. And the thing is, pontoon bridges get easily washed away. And sometimes at night, pickets have to be in boats as they stand guard.
And like I mentioned before we started, amphibious does not mean you can throw with both hands. I explained that to you. I'm glad we got that straight. So there's no more confusion. It was embarrassing from the beginning with this, but the left wing, has, you mentioned the weather, the transport stuff. They're running into problems. So Peter Osterhaus, we mentioned him. He basically, he's writing that the artillery horses are dying of starvation. They're running into supply issues now. The funny part about it is they're about 6-7 miles away from their supply depot, and they can't get supplies. So whether from logistical reasons, it takes 20 days to get their supplies. So they have to wait. So there's a soldier named Thomas Osborne, who's one of the staff people, and he's been in Slocum's army for a while, and he has his diary, and he blames the supply issues on Slocum. So he's like, I do not doubt that this 20-day delay comes from a lack of ability to cope with what he has on his hands. He failed Howard at Gettysburg, and I fear he will do it to us again now.
Yeah, Slocum does not come out looking very good in this. And in his own memoirs, now keep in mind, these are memoirs. You're going to talk yourself up. Howard says that he had a much harder time than Slocum did, but that Slocum was a lot slower than what he should have been. And there were delays created because of that.
Well, they did. I mean, the Rebs put torpedoes on the roads with these again. Yep. You're starting to see them again along the roads. You mentioned before about the corduroy stuff they had to get over the mud. Yep. But the Rebs there was some bridges they had to cross. They were covered with fall trees. They were blocking those. So, but it did delay Slocum ultimately 2 full weeks. They were supposed to both arrive on the 15th of January was the day they were supposed to arrive. Howard was going to be at Pataglio, and Slocum was supposed to get to Robertsville, but Howard got there. In his defense, he got there on the 15th, right on time.
He did.
He was right on time, okay, because he runs. That's why, he was moving fast. So he got there right on the 15th, but it took till the February 3rd for Slocum to finally get there. So, and then we'll talk more about the pillaging that's going to happen here in a few minutes. But that delay, who it pissed off was Sherman.
Oh, right? Yeah, because Sherman was a little bit delayed too because of the weather in Savannah. So he was not able to he's going to be with the right wing most of the time. So I think in the March, he was with the left wing. And then he would kind of, if he had to, go back and forth between the two of them. But he's going to be with Howard through most of this. He gets to Beaufort on, I believe it is January the 23rd, finally, that he makes a brief stop in Hilton Head, and then he gets to Beaufort. But he's not happy about the delay.
He's pissed off. He's snapping at officers. He's yelling. He's stomping around. He doesn't have the patience for it. Because what he doesn't want the Rebs to have time to prepare for him.
Yeah.
Now he doesn't know what he's facing. He doesn't know what the story is, But actually, speaking of what he's facing, so real quick, we'll flip the coin here and look at what the Rebs have to offer. So we're talking about the Department of South Carolina, Georgia, and Florida. Okay, we're talking about 18,000 guys. So you're not talking about a bunch versus 50 to 60 of Sherman's guys. This is as of January, at the beginning of the march from Savannah. Out of the 18,000, the Rebs only have about 13,000 present. So they're running. So he's got Hardee. We mentioned before, he's got William Telefair running one division with our old friend Lafayette McLaws and Ambrose Wright. And then he has James O'Connor, a guy from South Carolina, who was supposed to help him out, but he's slow. He's in transit. He's got the War Child, John Wheeler, as his cavalry guy, and he's got about 100 artillery pieces. So he ain't got much. He doesn't have much, but what he has the terrain. He has the knowledge of the terrain, right? And while Howard, we're going to mention Howard again, while he's doing his thing, they're doing a little bit of foraging, right? And they're doing a little bit of mayhem.
They are, yeah. And I think this is a good place when we talk about this, the attitude that the soldiers have, because it is admittedly different than what it was when they were going through Georgia. I don't think this is like Georgia seemed more like the march seemed more like, oh, we're going on a march to the sea kind of thing. This is where they mean business. And this is where and I'm sure we'll get to this at the end of the show. This is why the Carolinas campaign is very different from the March to the Sea.
there's a hatred in this one.
It is, yeah.
You
Like
know,
Sherman, he's got a really good quote in his memoirs. Somehow our men had got the idea that South Carolina was the cause of all our troubles. Her people were the first to fire on Fort Sumter, had been in a great hurry to precipitate the country into civil war, and therefore on them the scourge of war in its worst form. I saw and felt that we would not be able to no, I saw and felt that we would not be able to longer restrain our men as we had in Georgia, and I would not restrain the army lest its vigor and energy should be impaired. So he's not, he's basically saying, I'm not gonna, like, I have to let them do what they're gonna do. But O'Connell, in his biography of Sherman, Fierce Patriot, says that Sherman knew his men would stop at arson, but Sherman wanted to turn the heat up on the very place they had learned to hate, and to still trust his army not to become apocalyptic. Because Sherman is still trying to wage the psychological warfare against the South too, right? Because what is going ahead of these men coming into the Carolinas is the reputation that they got in Georgia. Now, granted, some of that is going to be a little bit exaggerated, but Sherman is banking on that too.
well, I mean, you get the reputation of the 15th Corps is what they're going by. But, this
Yeah.
is Blackjack Logan. So, Howard, you know, we'll find out later as he gets to Columbia that I think he legitimately did not want this to be happening, and it's probably why he was put as the right wing.
Yep.
Realistically, Blackjack Logan is a different story, right?
Exactly.
So his 15th Corps is basically Howard has to write letters to Logan and Blair, basically saying, to please stop robbing their valuables and abusing their women. That's the exact quote he says.
Yep.
General William Hazen, we've talked about before in the 15th Corps, he says, the demon of destruction seemed to be possessing everybody. Even the smallest drummer boy wanted to get even. So you can imagine, right, what was going on. And you could also imagine more as these stories are coming out, how more and more people are getting upset and they're getting nervous about this army coming.
They're getting scared. And that's a really good point you make about Blackjack Logan, why he was not chosen to be the right-wing commander for this. And I think it goes back to why Hooker was not chosen. Like Howard, he did not agree with what went on, but he knew he had to let it happen. But there came a point where he had to write those letters. And as we're going to see with Howard, what he does in Columbia is another reason why I think that Sherman made the right decision with him.
So Hardee's in a tough spot. He's in charge of the defenses in South Carolina. The only real mobile army he has is Lafayette McLaws. He's really the only one. The other ones are more fixed in defenses around the Charleston area because they still don't know where they're going. They still don't know what the plan ultimately is going to be. What the Rebs are going to do, they're basically going to set up defensive lines along some rivers that are going north, away from Georgia. So these are the Oshby, the Edisto, the Ashley. It's a whole bunch of them. Basically, there's a river called the Comedy River, Pataglio to Barnwell, now South Carolina. And basically what that is they're setting up a defensive line to protect Charleston because they still think they're coming to Charleston. So Hardee thought he would need about 15,000 guys to defend the city. Ain't got it. Because what he thought was going to happen was Sherman was going to pass Charleston on the left, go north to the high ground, like he did with Columbia, ultimately, and then attack from the north down to Charleston. So he doesn't know that Sherman had no plans to attack Charleston. He didn't know. What he wanted to do, obviously, was cut the railroads around the area and kind of demasculate, as they say, the area around Charleston, render it basically worthless. If you take all the railroads around it, you cut them off because you got the ocean on one side. Now you have no connections and you got the blockade. So they're screwed, right? The Rebs still wanted to defend the city. They talked about making all kinds of necessary preparations. But what they had to do was they had to have a plan to basically quietly announce to themselves how the hell they're going to evacuate the city. There's a lot of political pressure to keep defending Charleston, not let it fall. But Assistant Adjutant General Otey, he basically told Hardee, we need to make what he called silent and cautiously all necessary preparations for the evacuation of Charleston, because he didn't want to piss McGrath off, right? He had that whole thing but he knew realistically realistically speaking, they couldn't do it. There's no way they could. Ultimately, we'll talk about it briefly in a few minutes, but that's the fatal flaw with the Confederates as far as Charleston goes.
Yeah, like Charleston was just, and too, Sherman he's feinting Howard towards there. So of course they're going to think that, and he's feinting Slocum towards Augusta.
Oh, it's like he did with Macon in Georgia. Same
Exactly.
deal.
He's doing the same. So in that way, he's very much, there are similarities to the March to the Sea, but then there are differences like the terrain as well as the attitude that the men have. But yeah, like Charleston is just not, and it was like the Rebs had in their mind that he's definitely going to get Charleston because this is where we started it. Sherman never had Charleston in his mind, whether it was because of his girlfriend or ex-girlfriend, whoever
Who knows?
the fuck she was. He mentions a lot of women in his memoirs in this part.
Those little redheaded guys.
There's a lot of women mentioned. And he keeps saying like in my younger days or whatever it was. And
we'll talk about one here in a few minutes, Mary.
We'll
talk about one of Sherman's women. But you know what though? For a guy who had that many women, maybe he shouldn't have been so mad when he's sitting there and waiting on the 2nd of February for everybody to get there, because he's snapping and everybody's out and he's having a tough time. But again, when the time comes and he finally is going to move on, they're going to go north. There's really 3 crossing places along the river that he can cross: Rivers Bridge, Beaufort's Bridge, and the Sakahatchee Bridge. And Sherman, basically what he needs to do, he's going to take the 15th and 17th Corps. He's going to attack the Rivers and Beaufort's Bridge. This is going to be with the right wing. And he's going to have Kilpatrick. He's going to go around the left, around the Rivers Bridge towards Barnwell and Blackville. And what they were going to try to, right. And so what did I say?
Do you know the story of Barnwell?
Barnwell, is this where the Bang Barn is?
Maybe. If the Bang Barn is in Barnwell, it's probably not there anymore because they nicknamed it Burnwell after Kilpatrick had been through there. You know the story that they had a party with the freed slaves at the hotel in Barnwell as the town burned, and they were joking around saying they need to call it Burnwell.
Yep, I did have that story. It's pretty.
The hotel was the Bang Barn.
Bang Barn, there you go.
Sorry.
No, it's okay. It's okay. But these guys are moving through like those swamps we mentioned before. They're having a tough time through the swamps. Rebs got some artillery along the Rivers Bridge, and they're trying to slow them down. There is a battle of Rivers Bridge that does take place. But ultimately, the 17th Corps under Frank Blair is going to get across, fight those entrenched Rebs. And you remember, too, the time of the year we're talking about here, Mary, too, it's wintertime. So it's cold and the water's cold. So you can imagine how it is. Mm-hmm. A lot of these waters are frozen over. It's just crappy out. There's a lot of swamps. You're always wet all the time. And but basically, the army's trudging their way through, and a lot of the railroads above that Salkehatchie River to Blackwell, or Blackville rather, they're captured by the bummers in a place called Midway Junction, and they start destroying the railroad tracks. They're doing all that stuff. And there's a guy named Joseph Maurer who Sherman likes. He calls the boldest young officer we have. He's in charge of really destroying a lot of those bridges above the swamps. So you think of how shitty that must have been. Ugh. And but that's how they go. I mean, you're walking through the woods, all the stuff you mentioned before. There's those stories where they had to make the codes on the trees. You heard the story?
Yeah, that was really interesting how they would put, like, I think it was a cross for if one corps was supposed to go that way, and then it was like a cross and then something above it if another one was supposed to go that way.
Well, they would put a cross if the whole corps went through that way.
Yeah.
So if the whole 17th or the whole 15th is going, we're going to put a cross. So if you see a cross, everyone go that way. If you saw a cross with a line underneath this, that meant just the 2nd Division went that way. And if you saw a cross with a line above it, it was the 1st Division. So whatever division you were in, you would walk and you'd see that thing and say, well, we're going that way. It's like you walking through the trails and you see the trails. But it was a neat idea just for help.
No, it was really interesting how they did that for just, you think they do not, these guys, I think for me, it's like thinking, how did they do this without a cell phone? Because
the aliens, obviously.
Exactly. But it was aliens.
Truth is out there.
That's one of my favorite shows. Love the X-Files. um, anyway, but it's for somebody living in the 21st century, it's like, how did they do this? But then when I learned about that, it's so interesting how they were able to be able to still communicate and get this shit done.
Oh, like those wigwag guys, you know.
Oh yeah.
I mean,
Like they're
how they,
waving their flags
all that
around.
stuff, flags. But so you're getting to like the 11th or the 12th of February now. So they're chugging along, and the right wing's in the lead. Left wing is basically trailing in the rear. And they're moving to a place called Orangeburg. We've got to spend some time about Orangeburg, Mary. So they fight some rebel forces on the bridge. This is going across the Edisto River, is where the bridge is. But this is a real important communication hub that connects Charleston and Columbia. So remember, still the Rebs still don't know where the hell they're going, because
Nope.
this is right near Charleston, some miles west of it. And if they cut the communications, they don't know, if there's no way to tell where they're going. So Sherman's going to cut the communications, and the Rebs are going to retreat. They're going to head north across the Congaree Creek. And basically, one story that was fun about this, Mary, was the Confederates had a peanut factory there, right?
They did. Yep.
And the Union soldiers found thousands of bags of peanuts. And they just went berserk and had a party. So
well, that would be when I heard that, I thought that would be the ultimate food for them, because it's like, it's just pure fat, right? And that's gonna fill them up and make them feel good.
They just needed some jelly. They had it.
Exactly. And bread.
You know? Probably got the end, that end of the bread that no one likes. They probably throw that away. So Orangeburg, talk about Orangeburg. So this is a city that, like I said, it's a communication hub about near the Edisto River. And Sherman's going to set up his headquarters at a place called Judge Glover's house. Okay. Judge Glover, he's one of the signers of the secession documents, the convention. So, he's got the target that his house is getting burned. Okay. But, okay, I know this is a fun story we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
Glover's wife somehow knew Sherman as a young officer in Charleston. She recognized him, and she says, I knew you when you were younger, and I remember you as a gentleman, and I would hope that today you're still a gentleman. And she's pissed off. You know who she's pissed off as?
She's pissed off at Howard, because when Howard arrives in Orangeburg, there's this lady. His recounting of this story is hilarious because he owes up to it all. So this lady comes over to him, and Howard describes her as being much excited and somewhat over solicitous. I can't say that word. Came over to me and demanded a guard. I could not make her see matters as I did in the line of relative importance. So in other words, lady, your shit right now is not important. I'm trying to deal with army stuff, and yeah, I'm leading the right wing kind of thing. And apparently Howard was left deeply vexed as to how he had insulted the woman. So basically Howard's like every other man on the planet right now, thinking, what did I just do to piss her off? I just told her, like, I can't deal with you right now, lady. I'm so sorry. Like, no, can't deal with you. So then flash forward to when she comes to see Sherman. Mm-hmm. And then like Howard's recounting of like General Sherman says that he's very sorry, and he would try to make amends and have the officer who had, been rude to her punished. And then he's like, who could it be? And then she says, it was General Howard. And Howard is sitting there, and I can just imagine him like starting to like slump down in his chair, like, oh fuck.
Yeah.
And
it was one guy with the nice hair. Wouldn't put a guard in front of my house.
Apparently Sherman turns to Howard, and he's like, how is this, Howard? You imagine everybody's probably gone silent in the room. And then Howard explains as well as he could what had happened. And then he says in his memoirs, doubtless I had been impatient. When skirmishing is going on and fires are burning, the responsible head may have, on some occasions, too many irons in the fire. Sherman assured her that Howard was usually a kind man, and that she would find that he would protect her. And in the meantime, he already had sent her a guard.
Yeah, so he gave in as usual.
Yeah, but just how he was like, it was my fault. Like, and
it's all my fault. I pray to you. It's all my fault.
I was impatient. But it's just, his recounting of the story is one reason I love his memoirs so much. He's
Right.
so funny in them, and just
Well,
that, like, he basically puts himself out there saying, like, yeah, I was impatient.
well, whether it be the fact that Sherman knew her from her younger days,
Yeah.
and, or whether it be she felt bad about the whole Howard thing, for whatever reason, they didn't burn the house down, which is a real
Yeah.
surprise. You can go there today and go to Orangeburg, and you can see Judge Glover's house where Sherman stayed, and it's still there. And it just that's a place that he normally probably would have burned down, but they who knows why? Maybe Howard saved the day. He can't do it all apparently, Um, but once the communication lines get severed and the people at Charleston get really really nervous, right? Mary Chestnut, we've talked about. She wrote that really really good diary. The woman in Charleston. She writes that there was basically there's talking about the panic of the Union soldiers being that close to Charleston. She writes, Miss Patterson, whoever that is, called, and she described so geographically all the horrors to be endured by those subjected to fire, sword, and plunder. So she's exaggerating a little bit, but basically what she's talking about is these guys are there and they're starting to really really freak out. Governor McGrath, who's a pain in the ass apparently because he's always writing letters to these guys, and he says he must have got wind that Hardee was going to retreat, had to have, because he responds. He says, McGrath writes to Hardee, "I will tell you that a retreat from Charleston will be the death march of this Confederacy." So he said the evacuation of Charleston is going to basically be a mortal blow psychologically to Charleston. That who knows, but that's what he's saying. So that's how important they still see Charleston to go. Again, he ain't going there, but that's what they think.
Exactly. Yeah, they are not going to Charleston, even though they're close to there, but they are, however, headed to Columbia, and Orangeburg puts them even closer.
But eventually, we get to the 14th of February. Is that the day I think it is? By the way, yeah, it's Valentine's Day. Yeah,
Yep.
February 14th, 1865. So the evacuation of Charleston is going to begin. The Rebs move out under the cover of night. They take over. They take off. The city does surrender on the 18th, a couple of days later, to a guy named Alexander Schimmelpfennig, Mary.
Yes.
Our old friend from the 11th Corps. He's
Schimmel,
on the 10th Corps.
Also known as Schimmelfucker.
Yeah, the pig man. So he basically he's on a boat and he's going to come ashore with the 10th Corps. They're going to take over the city. They're going to accept the surrender of the city. So it's Schimmelpfennig's son. So the Union is basically in control of the town. And there's not much going on, occasional chaos here and there. But there's a story in a place called the Wilmington Street Station, which is a really interesting story. If you've ever been to Charleston, they tell you this story. So there are some local kids, some riffraff little kids, and they're playing with fire. Okay, a young Sherman protege, who knows? They're playing with fire matches, and they find some gunpowder, and they're throwing the fire at the gunpowder to make sparks. Well, they start a fire. It spreads to this Wilmington Street Station, which happened to house 200 kegs of powder. Yikes. So you can see where this is going, right?
Yeah.
It blows up the whole thing, kills 100 civilians in line for rice. So okay, so not a good story, but again, it's one of those things that people are very upset about. But at the same time, who's excited in Charleston is the local slaves, right?
Yeah.
So there's a guy, the writer for the Northern paper, doesn't say what paper it is, but on the 18th he writes, "A city of ruins, silent, mournful, in deepest humiliation. The band was playing Hail Columbia, awakening wild enthusiasm in the hearts of the colored people." So they're celebrating. I mean, Charleston's liberated. The moral, I guess, key of the Confederacy has been taken. And that's pretty much what's going to happen at Charleston. So it's going to really surrender without a shot after all of everything.
Yep, and it falls under Union control.
Yeah, they're going to raise a flag at Fort Sumter again. U.S. flag's back.
Yeah,
and it's going to stay in control for that. So around the same time, a couple of days before that, actually, Judson Kilpatrick and his cavalry are going to end up. They're going to end up feigning an attack towards a place called Aiken, South Carolina, towards Augusta, right? And what they want to do is they want to keep D.H. Hill away from going to Sherman. They're going to try to go up there and just kind of keep him in space. he ends up meeting Joseph Wheeler, who was waiting for him outside of Aiken. And they get in a little bit of a fight, and Wheeler ends up beating him and takes his hat. Kilpatrick, his famous hat, he loses. And that's a shame for him because he never got over losing that hat.
That's kind of like when John Buford and Jeb Stuart, there was one battle they were in together, and Buford managed to get Jeb's hat. That must have been a thing to take the lead cavalry guy's hat.
But Kilpatrick was never got over it. Was never got over it. Look, I love hats, but I mean, but that's what that was. But as this is going on, the Union Army is now approaching Columbia. So any pretense of where they're going, now they know they're going to Columbia, right? So they're going to Columbia. They cross the Saluda River in a place called Zion's Church. And there's a story where some Union soldiers had a little vandalism. You heard the story, Mary?
Yeah.
Where they took some charcoal and wrote on the wall some drawing of some rebel soldiers retreating and pissed off a lot of people in the South. And but
that's not the only church that they desecrate.
No, not at all.
There was one in it was, where is it now? In Hardyville that they take down, and they absolutely just they chop at the corner post and they bring it down, and then as it comes down, one Union soldier said, "There goes your damned old gospel shop."
Wow.
So they are they're destroying shit that they may not have on the march. They're being
you think back we were saying at the beginning of this that with the thing that Sherman was saying to Halleck, right? Or Halleck wanted to do this, that there's that mentality for for better, for worse. But the Army now is approaching Columbia. They're going to move west, just like we said with Charleston. They're going to move west of the city and then to get around north of it and then come down from the high ground. And this is where we get to February 16th. We have to talk about Special Order number 26.
Yes, we do. This is directed to General Howard. And Howard and his men are ordered to occupy Columbia, destroy the public buildings, railroad property, manufacturing, and machine shops, but spare libraries, asylums, and private dwellings. Mm-hmm. After that, Howard is to then move on to Winnsboro to destroy en route that section of railway. He will also cause all the bridges, trestles, water tanks, and depots on the railroad back to Watertree to be burned, switches broken, and such other destruction as he can find time to accomplish, consistent with proper sleddery. I don't know how to say that word.
Easy for you to say.
I can't say it. But these are orders that are issued by Sherman to Howard, which basically is a way that Sherman can come back and say, these were my orders, whatever else happened, whatever the fuck,
He's pulling the whole Shaggy thing from that song. Wasn't me.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
what
he's doing, right?
Exactly.
So and of course he gives it to Howard because he's got Logan, he's the 15th and the 17th. So he knows these are the pain in the ass. These are the troublemakers right here.
Yeah.
So he's going to tell them, and whether or not he really means, there's some quotes we'll get to a little while from Sherman later that, who knows, but about whether he really thought about that. But the only guy defending Columbia is a guy is Wade Hampton.
That's it. And he and his men, before they leave, they set fire to some of the cotton stores.
Yeah, he's got now a little bit of a controversy right there, actually. So he has a guy named Butler Young, and you know who else he has? He has Carter Stevenson, our old friend. He's everywhere.
He does.
So Stevenson, and so he's got Wheeler's cavalry still. So you're talking about 1,500 men versus 60,000. Okay, good luck with that, right? Beauregard is going to tell him to hold the city as long as possible to give it time for reinforcements that everyone knows ain't coming. So he's like, okay, I'll wait here all day. To your point, the city is filled to the gills with cotton. It's loaded.
It is.
And there's a contrast. So Beauregard wants it all burned. They can't have it. Burn it. Hampton says, I don't think I want to. Are you kidding me? It's going to burn the whole city down. So Beauregard appears to relent and say, okay, we won't. But he never gets the order Hampton does. So he ends up burning it. So they burn the whole cotton, and it ends up lighting the whole thing up again. Yeah. And Sherman, getting into February 17th now, Sherman's going to basically start striking from the north and west of the city. He kind of lightly shells it, nothing crazy, but just we're here, just so you know.
They're in there by the morning though. Howard He's got a really good recounting of it in his memoirs. He says that side by side, Sherman and I entered the city and traversed the main streets. There was not much demonstration from the white people, but the Negroes gave their usual exhibitions of delight, sometimes dancing upon the sidewalk, sometimes shouting and singing. And then the hilarious thing is that Howard says, I noticed that our own troops were unusually demonstrative in cheering for Sherman, and learned that traders and Negroes had carried out buckets of whiskey to them, wishing to please and pacify the men. The soldiers had worked all night and marched to Columbia without a breakfast. Numbers of Stone's brigade were thus excited and soon intoxicated. I love how he just describes that they're totally shit-faced. But he's like, Howard does not drink. The one thing I took away from this, he's not judging them. Like, he's just like, this is what I'm seeing right now.
He's just trying to.
He's enjoying it.
He's like, look, but
Whatever
so
the fuck.
Sherman ends up meeting with the mayor of Columbia, a guy named Goodwin, right? His name comes up a couple of times. So Goodwin, he's told that listen, we're just like he explains order number 26, you're going to be protected. Here's how it's going to go. But then he hears other officers planning. They basically joke and say, yeah, just wait till nightfall. Wait to see what happens. So he's like, wait, what? And Mary Chestnut writes in her memoirs again that again, Mrs. Pride, whoever that is, she goes, Mrs. Pride was in Columbia at the same time as Sherman until the fires began. Mayor Goodwin fraternized with many Yankee generals freely. Then, when they burned his house over his head, a change came over the spirit of his dream. So what they basically say was he was kissing ass of the Yankee generals because he doesn't want his thing burnt off. And they're laughing, having a great time. Oh, by the way, we're going to burn your house now. And then he got mad. But that just kind of shows the mentality. So the night of the 17th, fires are blaring out everywhere. There was a couple of test rockets that went off that seemed to signal the soldiers to light everything up.
Yeah.
They're
totally shit-faced though. They're
trash.
Drunk as hell. And like Howard talks about how some of these men, they were just boys, and some of them had never ever had whiskey before, and they're getting completely shit-faced.
No, in defense of some of these people in the town, they would talk about the whole city being lit up. They don't know if it was the factories or not. Fires are breaking out. They're seeing guys with torches everywhere. There's flames everywhere. Call Me Maybe's being played from all the speakers.
The soldiers are probably singing it.
As there's a whiskey. But a lot of the residents had said the whole city was burning. But who knows if that's even true or not.
Yeah. Well, Howard recounts it really well in his memoirs. Like, his is probably... I liked his account of it more than Sherman's because he was very much, you could tell that he was recounting the exact feelings he had that night. And I think this goes back to, again, like, this is one of the reasons I like Howard so much. But also, again, it shows that he would not, this is why Sherman chose him for this, because he was not one to let loose and just say, like, let's do this. He said, like, it would be impossible to exaggerate the horrors of that long night between the 17th and the 18th of February, 1865. Sherman, Logan, and myself, with all the officers under our command, worked faithfully to care for the people who were exposed, and we did save many houses in different parts of the cities. The flames would lick up a house seemingly in an instant and shoot from house to house with incredible rapidity. And that was because of the wind that was happening that night too. And Howard said the very heavens at times appeared on fire. Clusters of inhabitants would carry all of their valuables and sit upon them, and they were often guarded by faithful men. So there are Union men that are guarding these troops. So not all the Union men are going crazy here. A large number of our men who perhaps drank whiskey for the first time when it was brought to them that day in buckets became blindly drunk, and hundreds perished in the flames in spite of all their efforts of the comrades to save them. Mm-hmm. So Howard is one, he's not stepping back from saying we didn't do this. He's saying we were definitely involved in this.
So is he saying we didn't start the fire? Is that what he's saying?
Oh my God, I thought of that earlier today.
Yeah.
Hampton's men started the fire, but Howard is not.
They did.
Yeah, but Howard is not one of these ones that is saying we didn't do it. He's not being like Sherman in his memoirs, or in his official report, blames Wade Hampton for the fire. And Sherman Sherman admits in his memoirs that he did that completely out of just to blame somebody that wasn't him. but Howard in his memoirs, which he
Mhm.
wrote after Sherman died, Howard is saying this was us too. It's
I
not
mean,
just
it's a
Hampton's
conflicting
men.
stuff. Sherman writes his memoirs. He writes, because many thought the fires were deliberately planned. This is untrue. It was accidental. In my judgment, began with the cotton which General Hampton's men had set on fire when leaving the city, which is exactly what you just said.
Yeah.
But again, in the back of your mind, you have to wonder about that letter, that the Halleck letter, about how the salt in the wound, the whole deal.
Yeah.
Even though it was in Charleston, and this is where you mentioned Howard, and I think I think he should be absolved from any blame for these fires because it's very clear that he was doing his best. He wrote
He
that
was.
special order 42, right?
Mhm.
Where Howard writes, okay, and he's pissed because you can tell. I can imagine the swears that he must have been saying. Oh, dag nabbit, gone pretty googly. How much
If
so he
Howard was
must have
going
been
to say
saying.
fuck, it would have been during this one.
No, he wouldn't have been. He would have been, you know how mad I am. I can't swear, but I'm mad. So he writes his commanding generals. Okay, this is Blair and Blackjack. He writes, it's been brought to my attention that the commanding general that the certain evil-spirited soldiers of this command have threatened to destroy the remainder of the city with fire. He has ordered that all common soldiers use the utmost vigilance, even taking the life of any refractory soldier to prevent a recurrence of last night. And they said they could tell he was pretty pissed off. So he follows that up to again, the same guys a couple days later. I desire to call your attention to the fact that some of our soldiers have been committing the most outrageous robberies. So you can tell that he's hearing these stories now, right?
Yeah.
And he's like, what the hell? And Sherman's like, well, I did special order 26. The friggin' hell. I mean, I can't be everywhere, But at the end of the day, Columbia is destroyed.
Mhm.
Charleston's taken. They're going to move into North Carolina. But you know what Howard does before he leaves? And this is what's really cool about your boy Howard. That's why I'm going to decide he's the MVP, not you.
Well, this is why there is actually one quote that Howard has about the fire. He said that it was about 3:00 in the morning of the 18th when the wind changed the opposite quarter. And after that, with little effort, we were able to arrest the progress of the fire so that more than 1/3 of the beautiful city of Columbia was suffered to remain untouched. So he does say, but that shows right there what you were getting to. He didn't want this to get the way it did.
But he makes amends, though. So you mentioned Mayor Goodwin, right? Howard meets with Mayor Goodwin after this is all thing. The union's moving out. They're going to destroy railroads again. But before he does, he meets with Goodwin, and he provides housing for the homeless people, helps them find housing. He gives them 500 beef cattle to feed them out of the Union Army, and so he wouldn't starve. He also gives them 100 muskets to help maintain order in town. So that's a pretty cool thing that OO does there. I mean, you're giving weapons to theoretically the enemy, but he did that so he could ultimately save. So that's pretty cool. When you put that all together, I think it's clear why Howard was put in charge of the right wing, because he was going to be the adult in the room.
Yep, he was going to be the adult in Columbia, and I think Sherman trusted his judgment completely, and that's why, like, God, whatever the fuck Howard did at Chancellorsville and Gettysburg, what he does here is never taught. It's never talked about. All you hear is about how the Union Army ransacks Columbia. You don't hear about how there was Howard there and he's leaving them with 500 head of cattle. He's giving them muskets and he's making sure they're cared for. He's telling his men, stop this. This can't happen like this. He does, and Howard is one of the ones that does right, though, that there are Union men that as many of them are blind drunk on this night, there are ones that are still helping. And he says, old men, women, and children with everything that they could get out were huddled together in the streets. At some places, we found officers and kind-hearted soldiers protecting families from the insults and roughness of the careless. So Howard is not afraid to call out the soldiers either. He's very, and that's what I like about him, is he's not, he's saying this is on us, but we also don't don't say we all were this way. Please don't paint us with this. Like,
No, I think he's someone. I think Sherman knew that there was no way Howard could control those guys. But
no.
I think he was a guy he put in place. He was probably going to try, or
Yep.
at least someone he could say, "Look, I have Oliver Otis Howard, the Christian general. I
Mhm.
put in charge to avoid this." But I still got 20. He's still got 26,000 guys to control.
Exactly.
But I think that was more of a symbolic thing he did, because if Blackjack was the guy, Logan, they put in charge of that wing,
Yeah.
it would have been, the pillaging would have been a lot worse. So I think it was more a political thing as they were going through Georgia and South Carolina to maybe prevent a little bit of what their ultimately history blames them for.
Mhm. But then
'Cause
when
it
he
is kind of,
realizes what Howard's attitude was, because Howard and Sherman are quite close. That's quite evident, especially in how Howard writes about him in his memoirs and how Sherman writes about Howard. Because the Carolinas campaign, the two of them, like they're very similar in their recounting of it. But you can tell the level of respect that was there, and that Howard had probably said to Sherman, as a friend, I don't agree with the pillaging. I don't, but I'm gonna, I have to allow it because that's what we have to do right now. But I think he would only allow it to a point, and Sherman knew that. And Sherman knew that Howard was the one to keep the men in some level of control so that they didn't go totally, as Sherman said, apocalyptic.
yeah. I mean, in the back of your mind, he did write that letter, admittedly, that he was going to punish South Carolina,
Yep.
specifically Charleston. Now, whether it's all bravado or just for the politics, part of it is probably true, because he definitely did look the other way. That order, special order number 26, there definitely was a plan that night to light the city up. Now, the wind spreads and blows, and who knows if that was a story,
Can't
if it
control
was
it all.
blamed. But there's whiskey flowing. You got people pissed off at South Carolina. You could see where that was going. But I think what Howard ultimately did in Columbia was try to leave them with some sort of positive.
Yep, he tried to leave it so that I think he saw, like, my God, in the future, that this could be something that the North looks badly on them, and he's trying to make it so that it's not. But I think too, Howard was such a good person that he would have left them he wouldn't have left the 500 cattle just, like, I got to do this to look good. He probably did feel sorry for them. The way he writes in his memoirs all the way through about how people are suffering and stuff tells me that he would have done that anyway. And I think, again, like, this is something that not only does it get left out of the story of Columbia and the controversy behind it, which I do believe, like, yes, Wade Hampton's men started those fires and the Union contributed to them. It's 50-50. But you also have to look at the good Union soldiers that were in this, which Howard writes about. Howard makes sure that they're remembered. But you also have to remember Howard in this and the good that he did. And that, like, I think this is something that is why he needs to be remembered more positively in the Civil War.
Yeah. So we're going to jump out of the Carolinas here for a few weeks here anyway. So Sherman's going to continue to work his way north. He's going to ultimately try to connect with with Grant. He's going to end up chasing down Joseph E. Johnson. We'll get to all that, okay? And as he goes through North Carolina, which he treats very differently than South Carolina, as we'll find out, for different reasons. So anyway, so I think that's where we can leave this one off for now, as Uncle Blingy is going to move into North Carolina, and he's going to work his way up and leave Georgia and especially South Carolina in smoldering ruins. Ultimately, as the war comes to an end, as it does enter its final few months. So coming attractions, Mary, we got to talk about coming attractions. We got to talk about the fact that we will be doing our announcement for our book club winners, which will be Saturday. And we said 10:15
at 10. I think we'll do it right away when we start our live stream.
Okay.
We have to talk to Battlefields about that, but I mean, who's ever listening to this, like, if they're listening to it after it's already happened. So
yeah, hey, congratulations on the winners, whoever it is.
So congratulations, whoever it is. We don't know yet because the thing doesn't close until Friday. So next week we will be having Lisa Samia on with us to talk about Asia Booth and John Wilkes Booth.
Oh my God, we can't talk about him. John Wilkes Booth? He shall not be named?
Posted that picture of me with John Wilkes Booth the other day, holding the book. Finally got the memoirs, which I'm going to read this weekend. And then the week after that, we are going to be talking about secession.
We are going to be, but before we jump away from Booth real quick, we're going to be talking about Booth the early days. We're going to be talking
Yep.
about his days at Tudor Hall.
Yep.
We're going to be talking about his relationship with his sister Asia, to your point. And it's going to be a very interesting conversation. Lisa Samia, who is a writer and an author who's written books.
Yep, she's an
and she does a
award-winning author
presentation-
too.
Award-winning. And
Yep.
so she does presentations on Asia and John Wilkes Booth. We are very happy to have her on. So we are
Mhm.
going to do a rare guest appearance next week, Mary, with
Yep.
Lisa. So we'll talk with her. That'll be a good time. We both Boothies, and we appreciate the
Yep.
history of him and in the human psychology of how what
Yeah,
happened to
no,
him.
I
and
was
how
so
it-
happy when I got that book yesterday. I'm like, I'm
Oh, it's
so
a good book.
excited to read
It's
it
a-
because,
it's a
like,
good book.
I mean, as much as I've I've always been into studying John Wilkes Booth. Like, his sister is somebody that has always fascinated me too. I really, really like Asia. She's an interesting figure in Booth's history, so I'm very much looking forward to reading that.
So lots of good things coming. Lots of good things coming. So I think we will leave it here, and we'll talk more about Sherman later on. We'll pick up some different things, jumping from topic to topic as we're kind of all over the place, but it's a
Yep.
good thing to talk about. So again, we'll do our live at 10 o'clock on Saturday. We'll give away our book, round table. Hey, it was a great time again, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sure it will be. Yeah, we've got lots
That's
of
that's
people
always
that
fun, so.
are, I think, planning to attend it. It's our fourth one. We really like doing them. If you have never attended before, we hold them the third Wednesday of every month. And if you would like to attend, shoot us an email at info@civilwarbreakfastclub.com, and I will be sure to send you the Zoom invite for the one in February, and we will go from there. And yes, we will be determining the date of our book club meeting at the end of March, which we will be talking about Black Iron Mercy as well.
Black Iron Mercy. Hope everybody has their book, is ready to participate. So I'm looking forward to the roundtable that we are filming tomorrow, and of course our live on Saturday, followed by our discussion with Lisa about the booths. So,
Yep.
Any final words from you, the goddess of Goderich, as they say?
No, thank you very much to everybody who's supported us through these near 6 months that we have been doing this podcast. It's been unexpected how this has taken off for us and the community that's grown around it, and especially to you, Darren, for being a very awesome co-host with
I
this.
am awesome. Thank you.
It's a dream
I
come
appreciate it.
true.
Oh God, I know. Hey, by the way, though, speaking of the website, check out our blog and check out our fan forum.
Yes, Darren wrote a very, very good blog about Lincoln's the last part of Lincoln's journey to DC for his inauguration. So be sure to check that out. As well, we have our forum, which you can sign up for and participate. Lots of good discussion over there, including a what if as well,
God,
which a few
what
people
if?
have participated in
Those are
as
always a lot
well.
of fun.
Yep, those are allowed on our website. So anyway, lots of good folks over there. Everybody is very like-minded and not judgmental, which is what is so awesome about this community.
It certainly is, and certainly is. So we will look forward to seeing that. We look forward to seeing you next time, Mary, as we move on to episode 24. So coming around the bend to half a year. It's amazing,
Yep.
as you said. So anyway, it's been a pleasure. Always a good time. I'm glad a great talk today. Always a lot of fun doing these. As we
Yep.
will look forward to talking to you, Mary, as they say, on the other side.
Hey, catch y'all later.
Peace out.
Yeah, bye.